Guess it's just me. Brief history of tomorrow's? Never mind. Welcome back to episode number 2 of the Book Club series. My name is Kirsten and I love to talk about books and I read a lot, so let's get started. If you're a very attentive Goodreads friend of mine, you might know that I have actually not read these books the past month and a half. I am cheating. I'm sorry. These are the books that I started reading in February. Anyways, I think that they're worth a book club episode. My opinions on these books are very complex. So let's get started with the first book. The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I'm pretty sure you've heard about this. It's a very famous book, it's a very famous story, and let's just take a moment for the beautiful artwork of this book. I mean, this is just gorgeous. Also, this is a hardcover book with the never-ending discussion, hardcover versus paperback. Let me know what you prefer in the comments below. But to get to this book, my sister and dad have loved this book. They've been persuading me to read it for years, and I finally gave in. I mean, I'm super happy with such a beautiful book added to my bookshelf. However, I did not like the story. It's about a shepherd boy in Spain, and he basically travels around to Morocco. His things get stolen, he sells his sheep, he loses his money, he finds love, then he loses his things again, and then he learns how to control the wind. The story is meant to be this kind of reflection of a journey of finding yourself. However, I'm just not really impressed. Also, like, it's so thin. Can I really find myself in just 226 pages? I was just, again, not impressed. I also don't really enjoy his style of writing, and this is just not the book for me. However, I have so many friends and family who have loved this book. As I said, guess it's just me. Maybe according to my sister, I'm not looking for something. So I guess maybe I'm just not looking for something, and that's why I didn't like this book that much. I think I gave it 2 or 3 stars on Goodreads. If we're not Goodreads friends yet, don't forget to add me. The link to my profile is in the bio because for some reason I'm very hard to find just by googling my name. Anyways, the next book is Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harrari. I've also just finished Homo Deus, but that will be for our next book episode. And this book was so interesting. In high school, I quit history when I was about 15, so I just know the basics and mainly about Dutch history. And this book has taught me so much about human life on Earth ever since we basically existed. As the cover already says, it's kind of a brief history of humankind, whereas the next book will be a brief history of tomorrow's? Never mind, just watch the next book club. It goes into all the things that have shaped humans the way that we are now. So from making fire to the Industrial Revolution to slavery to democracy, etc, etc, etc. And I just find it super fascinating. So if you're a history lover, you've probably already read it, but just in case you haven't, this is a big recommendation. I think I gave it 4 or 5 stars on Goodreads. I am gonna say that it is a tough book to read. It's a lot of theory, a lot of facts. So my strategy was that I was reading this book in the morning during breakfast because that's when I like to read my serious books. So it did take me quite some time to finish this book, but again, and if you don't fancy reading a book for that long, maybe you can listen to it as an audiobook. Just a small tip. Next book up, That Inevitable Victorian Thing by E.K. Johnston. This is a fantasy book. It is not even set in our world as we know it because it is based on a world where Queen Victoria of England, a long time ago, did not name her oldest son the heir of the British Empire, but her oldest child. And this decision changed the entire world because for some reason they also decided that based on your race, based on your genes and your DNA, you have to marry someone who's basically the opposite of you. So to prevent any racial or any kind of difference. Very interesting. The cover of the book also contains some strings of DNAs and the code for RNA or DNA. My biology is not really what it was. This is a hardcover again. I'm so happy. Let me know in the comments. So now that you know in what kind of world this book was set in, the story follows 2 girls. One of them is the heiress to the British Empire and one of them is just a regular girl, basically. And balls are still a thing in this world because that's how you meet new potential candidates and check your DNA resembles or not. And that is when these two girls met. However, it turned out that one of the girls' DNA wasn't really what it should have been, and that kind of confuses the entire storyline. And in the end, this book is also about friendship. I don't want to spoil too much. Yeah, one of the two girls has an issue with her DNA. This kind of messes up her romantic plans that she had already made because she already had a candidate, but things changed, and I think you should read this. It's a lovely light fantasy book, and it's just super interesting because it's set in this completely different world that we know. I mean, the British Empire was basically everywhere in this book, and yeah, I just think that you should read it. Third book of today, that's not true. Fourth book. The next book of today is completely different than the one before. It is Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. Perhaps you have heard of Matthew Walker. He has been in numerous podcasts talking about why sleep is so important, but obviously he has also written a book about it himself. So he is a neurologist who specializes in sleep, and boy, this book makes you question all of your sleep choices and patterns, and it's mind-blowing. In the world that we live in today, sleep is not necessarily seen as something that is vital. Luckily, more and more of this is changing. For example, in the financial districts of the big cities, who sleeps? How many hours a night do they sleep? This book explains the numerous things that sleep has an influence on. Not just diseases, which is already a huge part of this book, and it just blew my mind, but also, for example, there's actually a fascinating study in this book talking about how sleep is actually not that different of having drunk 2 glasses of alcohol. For the students watching this, it also talks about the effects on studying and having drunk the night before or the day after, and how your sleep processes all the information that you've spent hours working on, but then you have a drink and you don't remember most of what you've studied and have worked so hard for. Besides the scary parts, he also discusses why sleep is so important and how dreams originate and what their function really is. I admit that I am a huge nerd, but this was such an interesting book. Even after I had already listened to the podcast where he was talking about sleep, just reading this and really sinking it in and like showing my mom like, oh my god, did you know this? If you have trouble sleeping, if you snore, if you drink alcohol but also are studying, if you have to wake up super early every single day and drive, in any case, please read this book. Then last but not least, we go back into the fantasy genre. This was another book by Naomi Novik that I read, and it is called Spinning Silver. All the books that I've read by Naomi Novik are always set in this Eastern European / Russian world, somewhere in the Middle Ages to 1800s, I'm not really sure. But just to give you an idea, Tsars were very much still alive and a thing and an authority in this book. Anyways, it's not so much about the Tsar, it's about 2 girls who before didn't know each other, but when things changed in their lives, they met each other coincidentally and needed each other's help and eventually helped each other in becoming free of an awful world. So it starts with Miriam. Wait, what does she do? It starts with Miriam, who is the daughter of a moneylender, and she finds out soon that she can somehow turn gold into silver, which is also why the title of the book is called Spinning Silver. However, the fairy king, yes, there's a fairy king in this book, somehow finds out about her success as being someone who turns gold into silver, and he wants her for himself. So he sends her on 3 quests, and then in the end, her present is to marry him, even though she doesn't even really want to. Their deal is that he gives her silver because the fairy king has some fairy silver, which is very precious, and he wants gold in return. But of course, she's stuck with the silver and somehow needs to turn this into gold. So she makes jewels out of this and sells them to the second girl in this book called Irina. And because Irina is wearing all these precious silver jewelry and crown and whatnot, the Tsar wants to marry her. But she doesn't want to marry the Tsar because the Tsar is actually demonically possessed. It is such a crazy book, but I promise you it is so good. If you like fantasy, if you like fairy tales, but obviously a very original fairy tale, and if you like stories that happen in this Russian, Eastern European world, then this is definitely a book for you. I am not going to spoil any more. So these were the books that we have discussed today, and thank you so much for joining me. And if you have any kinds of recommendations, please add them to your comments. Also, don't forget the hardcover versus paperback story. And also don't forget to add me on Goodreads because I love to see what everyone is reading and add that to my to-read list. If this was your first time watching one of my book club series, then welcome. and we do these kinds of videos every month and a half-ish, depending on how much time I have to read. So make sure to subscribe, because besides books, I also like to talk about productivity, sustainability, skincare, and whatnot. So like this video, and see you next Wednesday at 3:15 p.m.